So we continue. Sanhedrin, Perek Zayin, Mishnah Yud. The next sin listed in Mishnah Dalet that carries the punishment of Misa by skila, by stoning, is Hamesis. Says the Mishnah, Hamesis, someone who persuades, someone who entices someone else, another Yid, to worship Avodah Zarah, to worship an idol. Now, even if the person to whom he spoke did not actually ultimately worship the Avodah Zarah, he, however, the persuader, the masis, is still liable to execution. So says the Mishnah, this masis, the one who persuades another to worship an idol, who is he? Zehedyoit, a masis is a hedyoit. This refers to stam a person, stam a yid, stam a regular person, that is to say, not a navi sheker, not someone who assumes to himself the mantle of being a navi / a navi sheker. So zehedyot, the one who is doing the persuading, and hamesis is a hedyot. He's persuading, he's enticing, he's trying to influence another regular person, another stamayid, rather than an entire city, which would ultimately become an iranidachas. So we're not talking about a city, we're talking about one person toward another person. So only in that case is the oynish, is the punishment stoning. But if, so to speak, Novi Sheker is trying to entice, to persuade, to influence a regular person, or a regular person is trying to influence, to entice a town, an entire city, then his punishment is by chenik, by strangling, rather than by stoning. That is, one person says to another, I prophesy, I am saying nevuah in the name of God that a certain idol is to be worshipped. On the other side, at least two residents of a town succeed in persuading all or most of the other residents to worship idols. This is a case of an iranidachas, of a city which is considered corrupted, which is discussed in Mishnah Yud. So Hames is a hedyoit. Hames is a hedyoit. Hamesiach is a hedyoit. Amaloi, an example of how one might start persuading another to worship an idol. Amaloi says to him, Yeshira b'mokum ploini. There is a God in a certain place. Kach ocheles, kach shoisa, kach mitiva, kach miria. This is what this idol eats. This is what it drinks. This is how it rewards those who worship it. And this is how it punishes those who do not worship it. Right? She eats, she drinks. Mitiva, she rewards. Meria, she punishes. So he would not be liable to execution because of these words alone. Rather, he must suggest worshipping the idol, as the Mishnah will tell us soon enough. The Mishnah here is just giving us an example of how a persuader, a masis, would start drawing a person to come close, to become involved, to become interested in this Avodah Zarah. Now the Mishnah presents a very chumer dikadin, a very stringent law that applies only to this sin and nothing else. Kol chayve mitzvah shebatorah ein machminin alein. In all the cases of the Torah of people who are liable to execution, anyone else who is a mechuyev misa, we do not hide witnesses to catch them in the act. We do not hide witnesses to catch them in the act. Ein machminin alein. Ein machminin alein. The Rav says, machminin l'shon me'arev, to be an arev with an aleph, which means to stake out a bunch of witnesses to see, let's chop him. No, we don't do that in any other isurim shebatorah. Chutz mizu, except for this one case, to catch someone persuading another to worship avodah zarah, we do hide witnesses. We do hide witnesses. To explain a little bit better, a sinner is not punished with execution or malchus unless he was warned immediately before he committed the act. Eidim ve'asro. He has to be warned. If you do this, you will be punished. The sinner has to see the witnesses when the warning is given. If the witnesses are hidden and someone else gives the warning, he would assume that he's not being watched by witnesses, and therefore he will not be found guilty in Beis Din. The warning in that case is invalid because he didn't see the Eidim, and they're unlikely to deter him from sinning. However, in the Avera, in the serious, grave Avera of persuading someone to worship avodah zarah, this does not require a face-to-face warning, even if the persuader, the masis, was not warned beforehand, the Beis Din can still execute him. Pavos, because the sin of masis is treated strictly in this and in other ways as well, because the Torah says that we shall not have any pity on him. We shall not have any pity on him, the Torah says. And since no warning is needed, there's no need for him to see the witnesses, and therefore they may be hidden. That's pshat. The Mishnah teaches weiter when we hide witnesses and when we do not. Says the Mishnah, Amar l'shnayim ve'em eidav. If he said to two people that they should worship avodah zarah, they should worship a certain idol, and they are fit to be his witnesses, what does that mean? That is, they are not relatives, or they're not otherwise disqualified to be witnesses. They're not in any way pasul le'edus. Amar l'shnayim ve'hein edav. Hein edav means they're fit to be witnesses. They're not pasul le'edus. Then all they have to do is mevin oisel Beis Din v'tzorchen oisoi. They only have to bring him to the Beis Din, where the dayanim can try his case, hear the details, hear what they have to say, and give him the skila based on their testimony. That is, although the witnesses did not worship the idol, he is liable for having tried to persuade them to do so. If he said to one person, since that person cannot testify against him alone because you need al pi shnayim eidim, you need two witnesses, we trick him into saying it in front of two witnesses as follows. The person can say, the person who he wants to be masis, who he wants to influence. So he can say, I have friends who would also like to do this. And if the masis, if the persuader, then goes and tells the person's friends about the avodah zarah, then he has sinned in front of two witnesses, and they can testify against him. That is, it becomes shnei edim. However, if he was orum, he was clever, he was a wise guy, and says that he cannot speak about it in front of them because he's afraid that they will testify against him in court. So machminin lo edim achore agoder. We can go ahead and hide witnesses behind the fence in a certain place. The person to whom he was speaking then brings the persuader to that place. He brings the maces to that place. And he says to him, "Hey, mister, tell me privately what you said to me before." And if the maces, if the persuader tells him what he told him before, he should respond to him. How can we possibly leave the Ribbono Shel Olam? How can we possibly leave our God in heaven and go worship wood and stone? Eitzim v'avonim. That is, go worship Avodah Zarah. Although we don't need to give him a regular warning, we don't need to give him a saw we already learned before. We still must say something to him that stands in the place of a warning and give him a chance to change his mind. You see, this is also true in the previous cases where he tried to persuade two people. They too should answer him in this way, and perhaps in his response we would see that he's sorry for what he said. So, Im Choizer Boy, says the Mishnah. This is the follow-up to what we just said. Im Choizer Boy arei ze mutav. If he takes back his words and agrees that they should not worship the idol, it's fine, and he's not executed. Right? And the same is applicable where he did not take back his words, but merely remained silent. I mean, he doesn't repeat it again. Since he did not commit actually the sin of persuasion, after he was warned, after he was told, "Hey, what are you doing? What's going to be with the Ribbono Shel Olam?" So im choizer ba'arei ze mutav. But but if he says, no, we have to worship the Avodah Zarah. This is our obligation. This is what we need to do. It's good. It's good for us to worship the idol. So then, so then these witnesses standing behind the fence bring him to the Bezdin, where the judges can try his case and stone him based on the testimony that these people bring. Now the Mishnah gives examples of what a persuader must say in order to be liable to the death penalty. What does a maces need to say in order to be executed? So the Mishnah says, "Aoimer Evoid, Elech, Ve'evoid, Nelech, Ve'na'avoid." Someone who says, I will worship the idol, and you should do the same after me. Evoid, Elech, Ve'evoid, Nelech, Ve'na'avoid. Or if he says, I will go and worship the idol, and you should do the same after me. Or he says, Neilech v'navod, let us go together and worship the idol. Azabeach, Elech, v'azabeach, Neilech v'nazabeach. Or he says, I will slaughter an offering to the idol, and you should do the same after me. I will go and slaughter an offering, and you should do the same after me. Or he says, Neilech v'nazabeach. Let's all go together and slaughter an offering. Or he says, Aktir, Elech v'aktir, Nelech v'naktir. I'll burn an offering or an incense to the idol, and you should do the same after me. I will go and burn an offering, and you should do the same after me. Or let us all go together and burn an offering and incense. Or, Anasech, Elech, v'anasech, Nelech v'nasech. I'll pour wine, Nisach hayayin. I will pour wine for the idol's sake, you should do the same after me. I will go and pour wine, and you should do the same after me. Let us all go together and pour wine. Or he says, the last example is, I will bow down to the idol, and you should do the same after me. I will go and bow down to the idol, and you should do the same after me. Or let us all go together. All of these are, says the Mishnah, expressions of maces, of persuasion, for which the person saying this can be put to death. Now, just to explain a little bit better, that the first group of statements, I will worship, refers to worshiping the idol in its usual way. The next four groups of statements, which concern slaughtering, burning, pouring nisuchayayin, and bowing, refers to acts of worship that are unusual for that idol, but which still carry the chiyuv misa. Since someone who does any of these four acts is liable, someone who tries to persuade another person to do them is also liable. We learned at the very beginning, you remember, that these are the four forms of worship. So if he does them, he's liable, or if he's maces others to do them, he is liable, he's chayiv just the same. And the next avera listed in Mishnah Daled is a mediach. Maces is one. Mediach is someone who tries to corrupt the people of an entire town by persuading them to worship idols. Maces is with an individual. Mediach is with a town. That's what we say. Ir anidachas. Ir anidachas is a city that a mediach tries to persuade, to influence, to entice, to worship it over the Zohar. So a mediach means someone who says, let us all go together and worship a certain idol. So although a person who persuades an individual is liable for suggesting that they will act separately, I will worship the idol and you should do so after me, as we just learned in the Mishnah. A person who corrupts an entire town's residents is not mechuyev misa unless he says that they should act together. Let us worship the idol. Neilech v'navoid avodah zorah. That is, that the laws, the halachas of one who persuades all or most of a town's residents are generally different from the laws of one who persuades individuals. Individuals, I go and you go. Yes? Or he's trying to tell another individual, go worship this idol. Go worship this avodah zarah. Whereas by mediach is he's not liable unless he says that they should all act together. Okay.